What's that like to live deliciously? Chaos reigns.
Please don't scream.
Now, Sid, don't you blame the movies. Movies don't create psychos. Movies make psychos more creative.
What's going on? My name is Jonjo Lyons, and today I'm here to present to you my review for The Wizard of Gore.
Certainly the most startling motion picture of all time. The Wizard of Gore. This film will take its place in motion picture history.
Written by Alan Kahn and directed by the godfather of gore himself, Herschel Gordon Lewis, The Wizard of Gore stars all of these lot. A magician performs a show where he selects a female volunteer and appears to put swords, drills and other such items through them. They walk away and everyone applauds. Then they show up somewhere else dead of the same injuries they sustained in the magic show. Police are baffled and can't tie the murders to the magician. A man whose girlfriend is infatuated with the show begins to investigate on his own. Well, I wouldn't say on his own. She helps. The Wizard of Gore first came into my life as a teenager when my boy Calvin got me the DVD. I'd never heard of it or the director before, but even then, sitting down, I knew that I would never forget this movie. Wizard of Gore, at its core, is just the weirdest f***ing thing, man. With performances taken straight from the cheesiest stage productions and editing so weird that the film veers off into art house territory. I literally can't wait to show it to you, so with all that being said, let's see what's up this wizard's sleeve. This is The Wizard of Gore. The film begins with a speech from Montag the Magnificent, our entertainer for the evening. And this is a f***ing performance. He introduces himself and makes the audience question all they know about reality before strapping himself into a guillotine. The blade comes down and look at the state of this fake head. Montag's stump spins before it's revealed that the magician is alive and well. Cut to Montag as he begins his next routine. So we're just gonna skip over the decapitation, yeah? Cool. The show starts with Montag defying the laws of physics.
Perhaps. But not always.
What the f***? Montag then chats breeze for ages, eventually telling the crowd that they will be witness to human butchery. He asks which one of the women present will volunteer, then throws these fuck me eyes into the audience. His selected victim gets on stage and is hypnotized before being placed on the table. Montag then straps her in and draws for the saw. He shows us the saw is real, and then we watch as the magician cuts through the woman. And this is the first example of the interesting editing that's featured in this film. The madness ends with Montag throwing shapes above the now completely fine woman and letting her go back to her seat as the crowd go wild. Cut to later as the woman who was sawed in half goes to a restaurant. She takes her seat, but a moment later falls to the floor dead, her insides on the outside. Cut to TV host Sherry and her newshound boyfriend Jack taking a stroll. We saw them briefly in Montag's audience earlier and we joined them as they discussed the show. Sherry loved it, with Jack saying it was good but nothing special.
You know, sometimes you make things sound as exciting as a shoelace factory.
Whoa, hey, Sherry, come on man, it's a bit harsh. They happen upon a crowd gathered outside the restaurant and Jack decides to flash his press ID so they can get onto the crime scene. As soon as they're in, however, this happens.
The hand of that dead person touched me.
Which will be important for later. It won't make sense, but it'll be important. Sherry is freaked out, but Jack calms her down with promises of gin and they leave. Cut to the next day as Sherry gives Montag a shout out on her morning show. She announces she'll be reaching out to Montag for an interview and tells her audience to see the show as soon as they can. Cut to Sherry knocking on Montag's dressing room door. He answers holding a sword and Sherry introduces herself.
Mr. Montag, I'm Sherry Carson. Sherry Carson, I have a daytime talk television show.
She tries to get him to appear on her show, but Montag coldly rejects the invitation. Then, as Sherry leaves, this happens. Montag then suddenly changes his tune, giving Sherry tickets to see his show that night. Sherry leaves and we cut to this nightmare. A coffin rises out of the ground while Montag throws more shapes and the coffin opens, revealing the restaurant woman. He carries her over to this hole and we cut back to Jack acting up a storm as he's asked to see Montag's show again.
Sherry, No, I don't care if the tickets are free.
He begrudgingly agrees, then immediately reads of the restaurant woman's death. Cut to Montag doing the whole gravity drink thing. Montag makes a comment about humans' fascination with violence and its representation in media. He shouts his name, Montag! And then invites another woman on stage, saying he's gonna drive a spike through her head. Jack volunteers to test the spike and is convinced it's real. He then returns to his seat and it all kicks off once again. And here we get more of the film's genuinely interesting experimental editing style. This whole bit is so wild from every angle. He's fingering her brain, she's sometimes wearing a wig. It's all very, very f***ing funny. Then she's fine again. Then she's not. It's a f***ing nightmare. Honestly, without joking, I genuinely think the editing in this film is kind of amazing. Montag fingers the fake eyes out of the fake head when everything chills for a minute. Us now seeing what the audience sees. The gore being a representation of the rage the wizard is feeling. The audience cheer and the woman goes back to her seat. Cut to Sherry and Jack going backstage to chat to Montag. He invites them in and we get this line delivery. Honestly, one of my favorite deliveries of all time.
Why, it's nothing more than a illusion.
Jack challenges Montag, bringing up restaurant woman's deadening when we see blood on Sherry's hand again. Montag notices and suddenly Jack is convinced Montag is innocent. Is it the wizard's unending power and mythical influence, or bad writing? They make friends, but Montag still refuses to go on Sherry's show but agrees to perform an illusion, so he is going to go on the show. I don't understand. As long as they provide the resources necessary. Sherry agrees and they leave. In the car, Jack whinges about not wanting to go to the show again, but Sherry drops this bar.
We're going to offend him and he's not going to show up for my show.
Kisses him and goes to her front door. Then she sees the blood on her hand, but when she tries to clean it, it's gone. Cut to the news house where Jack sees a report of the second murder. He calls a colleague trying to get more info, finding out she was basically a f***ing mess. They end the call and we cut to the morgue as Montag mind controls the attendant.
Get out!
And picks up Spike Woman's body, carting her off to Red Filter Land and shoving her in his hole. Cut to Chicken Unlimited where Jack chats with the police contact who shows him the crime scene photos of Spike Woman. He can't tell if it's the same woman from the show, but says if it is, that means there's a psycho in the audience picking off volunteers. The contact jokingly suggests that it could be Montag, which plants the idea in Jack's mind. Cut to Montag's show that night as he throws his f***ing eyes over at this fella, controlling him into giving his girlfriend up for sacrifice. She is hesitant at first, but soon under the wizard's spell, she steps up onto the stage. Montag explains that tonight he will strap the woman down and subject her to this punch press. He then invites the man up to check that this bit of wood is real. I'll check your wood's real, Montag, eh? If you know what I mean, huh? Anal sex? They then demonstrate the punch press. And we watch for a full 57 seconds as Montag slowly lowers the punch press. And then slowly raises it again. F me. I think they're just trying to build tension and failing miserably. We then see the wood has a hole in it, which he gives to the man as he ushers him off the stage. He then moves to this evening's victim.
Pretty ornament. It would be such a shame to ruin it.
He gets her on the table, straps in her hands, and then we watch as he once again slowly lowers the press. Cue the drunk editing. We again watch the woman get murdered, both from the gory perspective of Montag and the infinitely more boring perspective of the audience. If that's what they can see, I'm at a loss as to why this show's so popular. Montag plays with the animal guts they laid on the woman's stomach for a bit before lifting the press and unstrapping her, revealing no injury. The show ends and the audience goes nuts. Cut to Jack and Sherry having tea as Jack shares his theory about the recent deaths and Montag's possible involvement. Jack then cuts off the conversation so they can bang. Cut to Presswoman in bed as a man enters the room and flicks on the light, finding her dead. And this might be my favourite performance of the film. Also, I'm not convinced that the man walking into the room is the same man from the show, suggesting that actually this woman is having some sort of extramarital affair. Either that or they couldn't get the actor back. Then in the middle of the gore and screaming, we get this edit. So good. Oh, so good. The phone rings, but Jack takes it off the hook and we cut to later. Sherry returns the phone, which instantly rings.
Hello.
They get the news of Presswoman's death with the description of what happened to her not really matching up with what we saw.
Mr. Kowicki was lying on the bedroom floor holding his wife's head. Yeah, the rest of her body was on the bed about 5 feet away. She looked like she'd been run over by a threshing machine.
Makes me wonder if they had something else planned for that scene, but I guess due to time or budget, they just decided to throw a packet of mincemeat over her tummy. Cut to the police station as the couple look over photos confirming the dead women were all at the magic shows. Columbo here comes up with a plan to withhold the information from the press and attend yet another of Montag's performances, ending the scene with this gem.
It's as if all the weapons just disappeared, like magic.
Cut to the morgue as Montag steals Presswoman's corpse and once again transports her to Red Filter Land. And awkwardly tries to stick her in the hole, so they have to cut the scene super early. In the extended cut, he's gonna have to pop her on the ground, turn round, try and lift her up again, slide her legs in, but one of her legs sticks out, so then he's got to pull her back out, push it back in, try and slide her in, and he's hot and sweating in this magician's uniform, and honestly, none of it seems really worth it at this point, whatever it actually is. Cut to Montag on stage with two tied up women. He draws for a sword and asks someone to test it, causing Jack to yell out,
I will.
"Is it me, or does Sherry look super embarrassed in this moment?" Cut to Columbo telling another officer that they weren't prepared for two volunteers and that they'll have to split up. On stage, Jack checks the sword, confirming it to be real, then touches one of the women's hands. He goes to leave the stage, but then notices blood on his hand, much like Sherry did previously. He tries to clean it off before being shouted at by Montag. Jack sits down and then, you guessed it, we launch into another drug-fueled trip into the mind of an editor gone mad. Montag shoves the sword down each woman's throat, causing them to cough their guts up, and it's all very horrid. He then finishes the show by carefully removing the swords and returning the women to their seats unharmed. The cops then follow Sword Women while Jack and Sherry go home. Cut to the cops tailing Sword Woman 1 in a car while Sword Woman 2 goes into a house. The car suddenly stops, and when the cops go to investigate, the woman falls out dead. Another cop then enters the house to find the other woman dead. Cut to Sherry and Jack getting the bad news, then going to the police station. Columbo tells of the seemingly impossible car murder, which Jack tries to say could have been committed by someone who then jumped out. He moves on to the guy who followed the woman into the house, but this cop has had enough of Jack's shit. He breaks down the facts of the case, also mentioning the morgue attendant was also killed. The cop tells Sherry to let Montag use her for the trick on her show, which Jack is not a fan of. Cut to the pair in bed where they talk for a moment, then bang! Cut to Jack asleep as Sherry goes to leave for the studio. He wakes up and tells her to be careful, and then she leaves. Suddenly Jack once again sees the blood on his hand and tries to wash it off with no success. Cut to Sherry's show as Montag does another speech, advising he'll be using the entire audience for this illusion.
That you now think no living creature can survive.
That edit to show him on TV was amazing. He tells us to concentrate, to put our being in his mind as he puts his being in our mind. Everyone apart from Jack is entranced by the me eyes with blood pouring from their hands.
Craig! Craig! Look at your hand! Craig! Craig! It's Montag! He's doing it! Montag! We've got to stop him! He's going to kill everyone!
He leaves as we cut to people at home in the same trance. Montag then leads Sherry and the cops to a few planks of wood. It's supposed to be a bonfire. There's like 6 or 7 planks of wood there, but, well, you know. which then go up in flames as Jack bangs on the door outside. Montag is about to throw Sherry in when Jack pushes him in, breaking the spell. Cut back to Jack's place as they drink and discuss the recent events. They explain why Jack wasn't hypnotized. He didn't look at the eyes. How he killed the women? Dunno. What happened to the bodies? No idea. And if he's so magic, why did he die in the fire? Then we get the Scooby-Doo reveal as Jack pulls his face off, revealing Montag.
What?
You fool!
Meaning it was Jack that was thrown into the fire. How? He jumps on Sherry, ripping her organs out with his bare hands. That's when Sherry starts to laugh, sitting up and revealing that she also has this nondescript power.
How dare you laugh? How dare you?
Look at me now, if you dare.
She tells Montag that he is her illusion and that he will have to start over, to which he responds,
But I am Montag!
Suddenly, Montag is on stage back at his first performance introducing himself. We then see Sherry in the audience. She turns to Jack and drops this bar.
You know what I think he's a phony.
Then the film goes all kaleidoscope and ends. The end! What a wonderfully out of its mind movie. It's a pleasure to report that I am just as much in love with and utterly perplexed by The Wizard of Gore as I was when I watched it for the first time. The film is a patchwork of all the things I love about low-budget splatter, with the cherry on top being the utterly ridiculous borderline art house editing and presentation. When I first sat through this, I just couldn't understand what the actual fuck was going on during the death scenes, as the victims go from dead to alive to dead again. After rewatching, while the editing makes more sense, the film as a whole remains a giant blood-soaked question mark. Looking past all the terrible, it's clear that the film is an early comment on violence in media and society's obsession with death, with Montag essentially playing the part of the filmmaker. He presents his audience with graphic depictions of women being murdered, only for the victims to be revealed as unharmed, to the amazement and relief of the audience. This is juxtaposed with the later in-universe deaths and the utter repulsion the public display at the sight of real-life carnage. It shows that even if the effects in a fictional death scene are absolutely flawless, the audience can relax in the fact that it's all fake and just enjoy the show. When presented with real death, however, the reaction for most is horror as expected. It draws attention to just how thin the line is between fiction and reality, whereas our reaction to the events taking place could not have been more diametrically opposed. Which is fascinating, and I love the fact that the director was commenting on this way back in 1970. I suppose after 9 years of making splatter films, you start to question the genre's popularity, people's love of it, and its place in the world. Under the surface, to me, The Wizard of Gore at its core is an exercise in introspective filmmaking on the part of Lewis. Also, as a bit of fun, consider this. I like to imagine that the character of Montag was a creation of Lewis's originally pitched to the producers of Batman 66. When the producers passed due to the intended blood and gore that would come with the magician, Lewis decided to go off and make him the villain of his own film. A film way darker than the Batman series without involving the Caped Crusader. I mean, they never mentioned the name of the city. It's Gotham. Right? It's Gotham City. So what I'm basically trying to say is The Wizard of Gore is to Batman 66 what Joker is to modern day Batman. Along with Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy, it is yet another film that Todd Phillips ripped off in his creation of his film. That's my headcanon anyway. Can you imagine Batman versus Montag? On the negative side, the film is super repetitive, with all the big death scenes having to take place on Montag's stage. This means we keep needing new reasons for the cast to have to return to the show, and it gets super tedious super quick. Technically, this is about as basic as it gets, with cinematography, sets and performances that are straight out of the worst soap opera you've ever seen. As with most horror fans, I enjoy films that are so bad it's good, and The Wizard of Gore is a film that I never see included in that conversation. We need to change that now. It's pretty terrible, but if that's your bag, I highly recommend you check the movie out as soon as possible. So that was my review of The Wizard of Gore. Have you seen it? If you have, let me know in the comments below what you thought. There's also a remake from 2007, I think. It's one of the worst films I've ever seen in my life, and not in a good way. Next time I want to review something super weird. I've got a few ideas in mind, but if you have any suggestions, pop them down below. But in the meantime, like, share, subscribe. My name's Jonjo Lyons. Stay frosty.